Shit, I've got no media.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Back to Through a Scottish Prism live again this Sunday. Last Sunday we weren't, the Sunday before we were. We're playing about with it here till we see how it goes and see how much you appreciate it. And as you can see here, I've got Alan, I've got Eva, I've got Lloyd. We've got someone missing, but apparently he's on his way. Mr. Boswell should hopefully join us sometime pretty soon. And while we're doing that, I've got to say 2 or 3 things that I would like to say. One, can you please remember to like and subscribe on the show? I always mean to say this at the start of every podcast and I forget. It helps us greatly. And also, we've got a few tickets left for the old fundraiser in Stirling on the 28th, Friday the 28th. It's a good array of guests and artists, etc. A few tickets left. Get to our website, www.liberatescot.scot, and you can get yourself a ticket. And if I get a good comment today, I've got 1 spare ticket. So if someone wants a ticket and they come up with a right good comment during the live show, then you could be lucky and get yourself a ticket. Right. Can we get started? Phil can join in later, and I'll tell you what, when he does arrive, folks, what we'll do is I'll ask you one question. I'm going to ask him a completely different question, and that'll teach him to be late in future. Okay, Alan, this week, what we had was, I'm just trying to look here. Techie, could you stick up the piece of media appertaining to the university, the Glasgow University think tank, that told us that there was no legal route to independence? Because I can't find it, which is great. It's all part of the joys of a live show, folks. But I don't. You read the article, Alan, I'm sure, where they said there is no, we were wasting our time looking for a legal route. It's ridiculous.
When I hear people saying that there's no legal route to independence, you immediately makes your blood boil. When you know these people are working against Scotland. Mm-hmm. And that's been Scotland's biggest problem over the years. Going back to even Falkirk, the battle, that wasn't the English that defeated Scotland. It was our leaders, the so-called nobles, the people who owned the land. They're the ones that defeated us because they betrayed the Smafolk and they betrayed Wallace. And that's been Scotland's problem for many, many years. Because when you betray yourself, it allows the English just to roll right over you, because you're fighting with one another rather than fighting with the enemy. So Scotland have got to waken up. It sounds familiar to today. We're so-called leaders, the SNP, who aren't fighting the Westminster Parliament. They're bowing the knee to them. They continuously tell us, just hope and pray and we'll get independence one day. Section 30 is just around the corner. Section 30 is dead in the water. We are not getting a Section 30. So stop playing the Westminster game. And Alba, stop promoting a party that is sucking up to the Westminster establishment, who are not looking for independence. They're looking for a Section 30 to give Westminster the power to stop us from getting independence. So stop your strategy of SNP 1, Alba 2, because that will never, ever get us independence. But let's come to the heart of it. If there's no legal route to independence, then we are left with only one conclusion. And it's not the conclusion the unionists think it is. Westminster blocks the democratic avenue. If London refuses to honour the Treaty of Union, which is supposed to be a voluntary union, then the Scottish people have to rise up and take back their independence. We're not talking about violence here. We're talking about civil disobedience. The Scots rising and saying enough is enough. Because let's put it this way. It's only illegal under English law. English law created by an English parliament that we do not recognise. A law that has no authority over the sovereign people of Scotland. International law is very clear. If you can show through a legal democratic process, and the Scottish Parliament elections are a legal democratic process, that your people want independence, then independence is their legal right. We just need someone with a backbone and the courage to tell Westminster, our people have made their decision. We are now an independent country. Because in 2026, that option is available to every single Scot. A one-line manifesto commitment that if you vote for Liberate Scotland, it is a vote for independence, nothing less. And that is the democratic way out of this union, making it very clear that we are not voting on any other issue. We are voting on independence for our country. So in 2026, people, let's all work together for independence. And the only way you're going to do that is by voting for it. And it will be on the ballot paper, not under the SNP, not under ALPA, but under Liberate Scotland. And that is independence, nothing less. Very, very clear message to send to both Westminster and the international community.
Yeah. Eva, the West love to hold up certain icons, and one of those icons they hold up is JFK, John Kennedy, who was, of course, assassinated back in the 1960s. He's famously said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. And that is the risk that Westminster run by refusing to acknowledge the votes of the Scots or the Welsh, and as we were discussing last week, of the Northern Irish. It's a big risk to take.
It's a very silly risk to take, but it's also a risk that John Swinney's taken, because the item that you referred to in the opener was directly quoting from Aileen McHarg, a professor of Scots law who works at Durham at the moment, and she was given evidence to a Holyrood committee in relation to the legal route to independence. And what she said quite correctly was not news to anybody in the independence movement who's actually been thinking seriously about the route to independence, because she said pro-independence campaigners are, and I quote, wasting their time looking for a legal route to independence and should not rely on the Act of Union 1707 claims that the UK is a voluntary union. So it's either a voluntary union or it's not. But the hard fact of the matter, as Alan touched upon, is that what we're looking for is a democratic route to independence. And there are several strands to that. The law is but one. So at the moment, John Swinney's line is, if the SNP have a majority, then Westminster cannot deny another Section 30 referendum. Everybody knows they can and they will. They have done it repeatedly for many years, and they will continue so to do, particularly when the conditions are as they are now. A, there is likely to be majority support for independence, and B, Westminster is at its weakest for decades, if not for longer, because of the issues that there are, damaging Starmer's government, damaging Number 10 every single day, and because movements for independence in Wales and Scotland are growing stronger, and because support for a unity campaign in Northern Ireland is also growing day in and day out. So this is the time to strike, but it's the time to strike with a strategy and a route map to independence that have a realistic chance of success, because they are the correct strategy. And that is not voting SNP 1 or a different party on the list. What it's about is unequivocal votes for independence, because, you know, the SNP voters are not all people who support independence. Many people voted SNP in the past because they thought that they got competent government, but they were not uncomfortable with the notion of remaining as a devolved member of the United Kingdom. So you cannot say that a vote for SNP is a vote for independence, because indeed in the past it has often been said, including by a former First Minister, that a vote for the SNP was signally not a vote for independence. So these days what is needed for Holyrood is A, a legal vote, legally vote in the next election, B, majority support for independence, nothing less, and vote for candidates who stand for independence, nothing less, and who tell you on the ballot paper, at the hustings, on the doorsteps, in the streets, on the telly, and in social media, that they're fighting for independence, nothing less, to be delivered at Holyrood 2026. Not can-kicking, suggesting recently at their conference that they were in the course of setting up an independence convention, and here we are several weeks later, and there's still not even a sniff of it. Not voting for people who say that after 2026 we will build support for independence, but build support for independence now, and vote for those who say they will deliver independence next year, not look for a referendum in 2029 and for independence being delivered in 2031. If people had listened to Alex Salmond in 2021 and had voted in the fashion that he suggested at that time, Scotland would have been independent for several years by now. And as I said last week, we would already have an oil fund and a wind fund and a wave fund and a national house building company and a national energy company. We'd be on our way to prosperity. That will not happen if people hitch their wagon to a useless, pointless policy that the SNP have got, the begging mentality, and as Alan says, bending the knee to Westminster. We need to play this game by Scottish rules, made in Scotland, by Scots, for Scots, and that's what an independence, nothing less campaign requires. You know, I saw the other day on social media, somebody said people like us had no policies and we were screaming freedom. Yeah, we are screaming freedom because that's what the people of Scotland need first and foremost above anything else, because it's independence that will deliver the prosperity and the hope and realise the potential of the people of our country in a fashion that devolution ad infinitum, can-kicking ad infinitum never ever will.
Quite right too. You know, there must be an election coming, Lloyd, because you know, this nonsense coming out, and we've got other things we're going to talk about later in the podcast where the nonsense is coming out, and it's something that it shouldn't be a surprise. But we really, while we're discussing it here, we should discount it because this is just more SNP bad, Scottish independence bad, scaremongering by the British Unionists.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, we're all used to that. We've been hearing it for years and years. But just to go back slightly, if there is no legal route to independence, then what is the Treaty of Union? The Treaty of Union is a legal document. The Act of Union is a legal document. Everything that we do in politics has a legal basis to it. Now, whether or not there's a direct way to independence by a legal route alone, I don't believe, and nobody believes that. What delivers independence and has done for many countries across the world are a combination of three things: the political, the civic, and the legal. But I find it very interesting that after the engagement with the United Nations in both Geneva and New York, looking at the legal route, we have a whole host of so-called Scottish legal academics, Aileen McHarg, Adam Tompkins, all coming out and saying that no, there is no legal route. Now, the fact of the matter is, these people have spent no time whatsoever looking at this. Is there a constitutional law course anywhere in Scotland? No. Has there been a constitutional law course anywhere in Scotland in the past 50 years since John McCormick took the case to the High Court? No, there hasn't. So any of these people are simply, you know, particularly the likes of Adam Tompkins. Adam Tompkins is bumping his gums, nothing more, and making sure that he keeps his stipend as an academic in Scotland, because that's how you do it, by playing very much the fundamental game of the union. Now, everything and anything that we do towards the election next year, anything that involves talking up independence, any examination of any route is a positive, because it's got the people talking again. In 2014, what drove the campaign was people talking about independence. Now, what we're experiencing at the moment is an attempt to close down debate in different areas of the independence discussion. That should be rejected. As Alan said, as Eva said, next year, 2026, we have the possibility, we have the ability, in actual fact, to deliver an independent plebiscite. Now, that's dependent on the political, the civic, and the legal coming together. The political being all the political parties agreeing that next year is a plebiscite election, that each and every vote for any independent supporting party on the strap line, independence, nothing less, that every one of those votes counts. And if that comes to a majority, then we have a majority for independence and we begin negotiation. That's where the legal comes in. But the most important element of is civic. We need people to engage in the campaign. We need people to go out and vote. We need people to debate amongst themselves about the huge, enormous benefits that come from independence. So all I see in this debate about there is no legal route is self-protection for the academics who want to maintain their stipends, but also, as happened when there was the Scottish UN committee in the 1980s, which rapidly got shut down because it was achieving traction and it was achieving success. What we're having here now is the crushing down of the extension of the Scottish UN Committee of the 1980s, with the case being taken to the Decolonisation Committee of the United Nations. This only happens when there's a threat to the status quo. And the fact of the matter is, the legal routes being examined by the independence movement and elements of it, the civic routes being examined by the independence movement and the elements within it, and the political routes, which currently, by the political parties, the main political parties, are not being properly examined, are being undermined by those who benefit from Scotland remaining within the Union. That's all that's going on here. They can say as much as they like, there is no legal route. Maybe there isn't a legal route, but you require legal confirmation of your political decisions made by the civic engagement of the people. Without it, you have no future.
Nice of you to join us, Mr. Boswell. We're discussing the mating habits of the Amazonian bullfrog, and we'd like you to say what you think about the mating habits of the Amazonian bullfrog. No, I tell you, we started.
It's riveting. Riveting.
Yeah. Well, yes, apparently. Great that you got here. We've been talking about this study that came out from a pro-unionist think tank suggesting that there's no legal route. But I bet you, if we went back in time, you would find that the 60-odd other nations that left the UK were told the exact same.
Well, the bottom line is Professor Black, KC, says otherwise, and he's investigated it. I know you've spoken about that, you bound of, and we were there. I was there when this was unveiled, and you know, it's embarrassing when you see what these people are saying. Completely opposite. Because the panel in Inferno, this was Sharof Azizov, the executive director of the Geneva-based human rights NGO Justice pour Tout International, Professor Robert Black, KC, FRSE, Emeritus Professor of Scots Law at Edinburgh University, Professor Alf Baird, scholar and author specialising in colonial studies, Craig Murray, former British diplomat and ambassador, and Sarah Salyers, director of the civil society organisation Salvo. So they've actually done their homework, and I caught what Lloyd was saying on the money. They've actually checked the facts, they've researched it, and contrary to the education system in Scots law that has been crammed down the neck of every single individual that studied law on the position of the Constitution of Scotland, Professor Black actually read the contrary position proposed by Salvo and the SSRG conference and other places, and found that Scotland is indeed a colony. So anyone who's coming from a left or right wing think tank will not be objective. These people are not being objective. I'm with the Emeritus Professor at Edinburgh University, not these shysters. We are a colony, and it's time to get out.
Yeah. But, you know, that is absolutely true. But the biggest story of the week, and it does fold into this, Alan, is the fact that the President of the United States, now I never thought I'd hear myself saying this, but he was actually maligned by the BBC. He was wrongly punished by the BBC, who we know took 57 minutes out of one speech, and I joined it together and literally blatantly accused them of a crime. He's now going to sue for $5 billion. It's set the hair's running, and there's dividing into two camps. So we've got the ones who are quite happy to stick the boot into the BBC and the Labour government and use it as a way to push themselves forward, and the others who are saying, oh, it's terrible, the BBC, it's the greatest news source in the world and they don't tell lies, we know that. Well, we in the Celtic fringes know different, Alan. We very much know the different. I personally, I'm taking a view of the more beatings they get, the better. But it certainly caused furore south of the border.
Yeah, well, my first reaction was, oh no, shock, horror. The BBC have been telling lies. My God. How many times have we been telling people this? I mean, Trump's suing for $5 billion. How much could we have sued them for during the 2014 referendum? Because the BBC were the mouthpiece of the Better Together campaign. They told lie after lie. Remember the interview where I think it was Nick Robertson?
That's it, we've got it up. Yeah.
That said Alex Salmond didn't answer a question. Then we got hold of the full. Yeah. Then we got hold of the full interview, and Alec not only answered the full question, he answered it in detail and then repeated it because Nick Robertson said, "Would you answer that question?" So he did again, but Nick Robertson still said he hadn't answered the question. What the problem is with the BBC is if you answer the question truthfully and it's not within their narrative, then you haven't answered it at all because it's not what they want to hear. But the BBC have been lying since it was born. I mean, it was the London calling. I mean, how many... that's exactly what the BBC is all about. London calling, sending London's message to Scotland so as they could lie to the people of Scotland and instill fear. They pushed the GERS report, the most corrupt document in history, GERS, telling us how badly we are running our economy. Yet our GDP is about £250 billion that England benefit from. I mean, we'd never ever see the BBC speaking up Scotland. When they talk about Scottish health services or Scottish council services, they always put the word Scottish beside it. When they talk about the English services, they just talk about the health service, as if it is the whole lot, including Scotland, that is run down, giving a false narrative to voters in Scotland that the SNP are running things bad. Now, the SNP are not perfect. We all know that. But at least they're running services better than what England and Wales are running them at this present time. But that's never, ever shown through BBC reports because the BBC are a propaganda unit, and it always has been. And I hope that Trump wins this battle and destroys the BBC, because the BBC needs destroyed as much as this Westminster government do.
I've got to say, Alan, I don't often disagree with you, but I do because, you know, if he wins his case for $5 billion, who do you think is going to pay it? The same people who paid for the bank bailout, the same people who are paying for a Land Rover Jaguar, the same people who are paying for every mess up and screw up that happens out of Westminster. It will be the ordinary Joe and Johnny. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I a donut, Eva?
Well, there's a reason why Alex Salmond referred to the BBC as the British brainwashing corporation, and he was spot on as usual. That's where we are. There's I suppose a habit developed within the BBC, for example, when they deal with football and they refer to the British national team when they're talking about the England games. That's the sort of garbage that we're so used to putting up with, and people really shouldn't. But there's another fantastic item written today about the BBC, and it's or it touches on the BBC, and it's by Kevin McKenna in the Herald, and he reminds us all that this carry on about the BBC and Trump isn't restricted to Trump. A huge amount of the fallout is to do with the BBC propaganda unit and the way that it dealt with the LGBTQ plus issues, where they constantly misinterpreted and misreported incidents that surrounded the whole gender ideology debate, so that they appeared to have taken one side against the other, didn't report neutrally at all. And there was a very determined plan and programme in place that, in effect, tended to censor those who would be described as gender critical and favoured and gave loud voice to those who supported self-ID and the like. So there's an awful lot more to this than meets the eye. It requires proper consideration and investigation, and it requires a lot more people to be sacked than the two who've already fallen upon their swords. A lot more has to be done to bring the BBC right into the public spotlight and cast sunlight on what's been going on in these dark and dismal corridors for decades. But it won't happen in time for Scotland. That's why social media and word of mouth and other areas of publicity, particularly of political matters, are so vital to get the message across. You know, we went to the BBC demonstrations way back more than a decade ago, and people would say, is that news or did you hear it on the BBC? It was right then and it's right now. If it's on the BBC, take a large dose of salt before you listen to anything that comes from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the usual suspects, as you would imagine, Lloyd, from the right. But can I just say that Eva has always been so kind. She's misrepresented, misreported, lied through their teeth, Eva. They lie through their teeth. You're just too kind. You're too nice a woman. But here we got one of them, Liz Truss. Oh, we've lost Liz. What a shame. Liz Truss, she's joined in, sticking the boot into the establishment now. An establishment figure sticking the boot into the establishment is always a joy to watch, Lloyd. But you've always got to think, what are their ulterior motives?
Oh, well, Liz Truss is pretty straightforward. She wants a job. She wants people to listen to her. She wants money. Anybody that jumps on, Trump's coattails, like Farage and all that bunch, all they want is they want the patronage that comes from it. But I'd like to go back to what Eva said. It's convenient for the BBC, and more importantly, it's convenient for the British establishment to focus this entire BBC report on the issue of the misrepresentation of Trump. The bulk of that report is not about the misrepresentation of Trump. The bulk of the report is about what Eva referred to is the control and manipulation of information around the gender recognition issue. A very powerful lobby within the BBC, where effectively reporters were cancelled or indeed lost their jobs for not being prepared to tell the lie that science is wrong and that there are more than two sexes, right? But the other underlying thing, which is also a bigger part of the report than Trump, was the inbuilt bias within the BBC created over the past decade to maintain the support for Israel. The whole fact that 37 times more often did the BBC talk about the death of an Israeli than they talk about the death of one Palestinian. 37 times, right? You have more chance if you get run over in Jerusalem. You've got 37 more chances of being on the BBC News than if you get killed by a member of the Israeli Defense Forces in Gaza. Now, why did that happen? Maybe it had something to do with the imposition into the BBC of three particular people, two of whom who have fallen on their sword, and another one, Robin Page, the former editor of the Jewish Chronicle, was made head of news and controller of news, and forced reporters to remove certain words, certain descriptions, which would have given the impression that there were war crimes being carried out by the Israeli government. So the British establishment can focus itself on the so-called threat to the BBC from Donald Trump. But the reality is the threat to the BBC has come from the British establishment itself and its slavish support for Israel and its slavish support for the trans rights and gender rights community. Now, these are things which are clearly, to the bulk of the people of this country, are not things that people accept. Now, focus on Trump. Focus on the fact that Trump could potentially bankrupt the BBC, but that's not the real story. In actual fact, they make the likelihood of Trump actually taking a court case out against the BBC. And remember, Where will this court case happen? They're talking about Florida, right? Exactly what is the BBC's presence in Florida? You know, if he were to win the case, exactly how would they expedite whatever conclusion they came to from a Florida court? Well, every single BBC reporter in North America will be arrested and deported or have their bank account frozen. This is a nonsense. We are deliberately having our focus taken away from the real elements in this report. It does not it does not benefit the people of this country. It does not hurt the people of Britain for the focus to be on Trump. What might enlighten the people of this country would be if the BBC actually talked about the two major parts of the report, which is the inherent bias, pro-Israeli bias of the BBC during the past 2-3 years genocide, and more importantly, the absolute capture of the BBC, very specifically BBC Scotland is a captured organisation by those who have promoted the transgender rights issue. These are the things that affect our people. The fact that Donald Trump's got a flea in his ear about a bit of badly manipulated editing is of little or no importance in the big scheme of things. But the capture of the BBC, the use of the BBC for deliberate Israeli propaganda and pro-trans rights propaganda affects the lives of every one of the people in this country. And that's where our focus should be. And the BBC are deliberately using, and the media and the British establishment are deliberately using the Trump element of this report to take the focus away from those two crucial elements.
Yeah. I mean, they've never accused them of genocide. They don't use the word genocide on the BBC at all. They never would. As to their Florida, I mean, as far as the Americans are concerned, the world revolves around America, nothing else, and everyone's just got to fall into line. Anyway, here's the other thing, because it's only what upsets them is we've made, the hint, they said nothing, they lied about Alex Salmond, they've lied about so many things in Scotland. And even this week, and we're going to come on to that later, they're allowing the Labour Party to get away with lies without holding them up, Phil. But here's the Russians chipped in on this. This is a belter. They're great at gaslighting us. But the Russians said, the BBC have been lying constantly. And one of the ones was about Bucha, if you remember the so-called massacre.
Yes.
And they lied about that and accused the Russians of committing a massacre, which was proved to be untrue. But of course, the BBC didn't apologise and didn't take it back. There's no suing of the BBC from Russia. They're selective in their lies. This time they just bit off more than they could chew.
Yes, indeed. And Lloyd is correct. All the guys are correct. This is a story about fake news. This story about fake news is more fake news to hide the truth in this world from criticising the establishment itself. And the Beeb has ever been the mouthpiece of this establishment. It spreads the lies the establishment once spread and always has. And the Russian comment is correct. And, if the BBC is destroyed, I hope, as Lloyd suggested, it folds as a legal entity on its own, rather than dragging down the people who foot the bill as usual. I mean, the BBC themselves report they're in the midst of a crisis. This is a crisis because the Director General and the Head of News have both resigned. And Trump $1 billion lawsuit is $750 million.
He's talking about $5 billion now,
yeah, but then again, it's Trump and sanctions with 500% sanctions. They'll probably go with the first. Now, if God knows what they're going to end up, you don't know. You trust Trump just talks crap. The problem is occasionally, like a broken clock, sometimes he's right, and he's got a point here. The BBC were out of order. I mean, I can't remember the name of the observant interviewee, but it was of the BBC interviewer, a comment he made interviewing him at the time, and he said, if you didn't think the way that you think, you would not be sitting in that chair. So the people working at the BBC, you only get to positions in politics, you only get to be a political leader if you think a particular way. You will not be promoted. You will not get through the system other than through revolution, unless you think the way the establishment wants you to think, to be at the front They either be it the mouthpiece as a supposed leader. So sadly, we need a revolution to break this trend. We need to break Britain. We need to break the UK to set the people of Scotland free. It's the only thing that's going to work. This is more examples of exactly what's been going on forever, as far as I'm concerned.
But I would also suggest, Phil, that they should also break free for the people of England as well, and Wales and Northern Ireland, not just Scotland. It would be the greatest thing. The union would breaking up would benefit everybody, except the 1% mob. But Alan, the right wing, and particularly the Reform Party and GB News, are the two most vociferous in this, promoting, get Starmer out, get Reeves out, get Nigel in, let's have an... And they're encouraged because the latest polling, and it's working for them at the moment, is showing that they are way in front in this latest opinion poll. Reform on 33%, with the English Greens on 17%, Conservatives and Labour on 16%, the Liberal Democrats 11%, the others 3%, SNP 3%. SNP around 3 or 4 means they're going to win a lot of seats, folks. Same Plaid Cymru in 2 means they're going to win a lot of seats. But what that means, Alan, is that simply this plan to get in Nigel and bring in absolute extreme right-wing neoliberalism, that's the end game here.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like positiveness for Reform and the Greens, but it's not. It's desperation. People aren't running towards Reform and they're not running towards the Green. They're running away from the old British establishment parties because they have failed drastically. I mean, you have a Labour Party that is more right-wing than Margaret Thatcher's government. Did you ever believe that would have happened? Even when Tony Blair was in power, he didn't go to the extremes that this right-wing Labour Party are going to. I mean, the Labour Party attacking the vulnerable, attacking the disabled, attacking the pensioners. Now, the pensioners, this is the laughable one on this. You never attack the ones who come out to vote because you won't get back in again. And that's why I think Starmer's position and role in this whole debacle is to make the Labour Party unelectable ever again. Because the establishment want rid of any mere thought of a left-wing rise. And Labour, that there's still quite a lot of really, really good members of the Labour Party who still think very naively that socialism will come one day under Labour. That's the same as thinking independence will one day come through the SNP. It just isn't going to happen because the establishment have got their hooks right into these parties. But people who are voting Reform, think very carefully because this isn't going to give Labour or Tories a good kicking. It's going to give a good kicking to the NHS, to social services, to pensions, and to every other service that our tax is going into. Because the first thing they're going to do is transfer the tax to the richest. They will cut the rich tax and make us pay through having less services and then having to pay an insurance on our health. Because let's make no mistake about this, Reform leaders are well into the insurance companies for funding. That's where they get a lot of their funding from. That and the arms industry. They are heavily invested in those two industries, the two industries that they are trying to promote. I mean, Farage, people say, but Farage has never said that he's going to privatise the NHS. Yes, he has. He said it in public forums that Britain needs to move to an insurance-based health service. That means he's going to sell off the NHS. That's why he's so closely involved with American insurance companies. So that's what you're voting for with Farage. He's got this great tactic of using your fear against you. And the fear that he promotes is immigrants. Despite the fact he's accepting money from the arms industry, which is causing the immigrants to come over here, the people on the boats, they're fleeing the bombs that are funded by the people who are funding Reform. But even the campaign that the Flag Their Flags, one of those leaders was arrested and jailed for people trafficking. Vietnamese for immigrants. He was trafficking them and he was arrested for that and served time in jail. That's the kind of people who you are voting for. These people cannot be trusted. And I said it umpteen times on this programme. Stop listening to what politicians are telling you and start watching what they are actually doing, because they are two totally different things. Voting reform will harm each and every citizen of Scotland. And you could wave bye-bye to every single policy that Alex Salmond fought hard to bring into this country, because they will all be gone along with the Scottish Parliament and our best route to independence.
Absolutely, absolutely they will. On that, this week, there was a couple of by-elections down south, Eva. The Greens up by 24% in Canterbury, Labour down 25%, and the Lib Dems down 12%, a Green gain. They seem to be the beneficiaries of the left vote. In North Somerset, where we go, Reform didn't do too badly, but the Greens, 56% for the Greens. But the Reform vote dropped by 7%. And they're both low turnouts, of course, Eva. Are the Tory and Labour parties in terminal decline? Is this a shift change? Is this really something new happening?
No, I think what's happened is that the people of the United Kingdom are looking at what has happened with the Labour Party since they took office. And you just have to Google Labour Party scandals, and there's a list as long as my arm. Angela Rayner resigned as Deputy Prime Minister following controversy over under-declared tax on her second home purchase. Rushanara Ali resigned as Minister for Homelessness after a property she owned was re-rented with a significant rent increase. Lord Mandelson, who should never have had the job in the first place, forced to resign as US Ambassador after history with Jeffrey Epstein came out. Other resignations include Annalise Dodds over defence, Vicky Foxcroft over welfare plans, blah, 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 blah. The Labour Party is riven with disrepute and scandal at the moment, and that's why people are not supporting them. The Tories have crashed and burned, that's quite clear, because so many of their people are defecting to Reform. And Reform are populist because, unfortunately, some people think they're saying the right things. The Greens are benefiting because people still stupidly think that green means environmentally friendly and let's all worry about climate change, when in fact what we should be doing in Scotland is considering what one of the viewers said early on in the chat. And there's a question here from HFerry5. What will John Swinney do if we get a pro-independence majority in May, but it's not an SNP majority? Will he dismiss that and stand in agreement with England? Should he resign if it happens? This is where Scottish independence supporting voters and politicians should be addressing themselves. It's the gap between support for the SNP and support for independence. That's what needs to be addressed in Scotland to counteract the rise of Reform, who will take less seats in Scotland if they carry on the way they're going. The Greens will have some seats in Scotland, and we know how disastrous that has been in recent years, with some of those people elevated quite incorrectly and wrongly, in my view, to positions, ministerial positions, big wages, and created havoc, and in some cases have cost us millions in terms of applications to the courts and ongoing court actions. So John Swinney needs to look at the gap between support for his party and support for independence, and then consider very carefully what it is that he wants to achieve. Is he going to continue to put party before country, or is he going to put country before party? If the answer is the former, then people know not to vote SNP, and particularly not to encourage votes for the SNP, because the only reform Scotland needs is independence. And the only way we're going to get it is with a campaign that's run on the basis of unity, of purpose, looking at next year being an independence election. If it's not, if we are in a set of circumstances where the SNP failed to come up with a majority, we could be looking at a unionist coalition, and that may very well include the Greens, who have said in Scotland that for them independence is not a red line. So if you're in Scotland and you support independence, don't even begin to consider voting Green, because it's not going to deliver that precious prize that we need next year to start to rebuild our country.
Yeah. I wrote an article this week, Lloyd, where I went back to actually Thatcher and worked it through. If I just take it from this point of view, the media and the narrative gets going, and if we go to Theresa May, she wasn't moving quick enough on Brexit for them. So they started, the narrative was she has to go, bring in Boris will do it. So Boris came in, they said, all our problems are because we're in the EU. Once we get out of the EU, everything will be a life of, milk and honey. And then they got Boris, and they went, well, maybe you're COVID and everything else. He's the problem. We get rid of him and we replace him with someone else. It will be fantastic. And they got Liz Truss. She lasted 46 days. And they went, oh, she's the problem. Everything will be fine if we get rid of her. And we'll bring in this guy because he's great. He's an ex-banker. His wife's a billionaire. He's a millionaire. Bring in Rishi. And then they went, oh, no, the Tories are the problem. That's the problem. We'll fix it by bringing in the Labour government and it'll all be great. And they got the Labour government. And now what they're saying, oh no, the Labour government's a problem. All we need to do is to change the government again. It's the system that's wrong. Everything needs changed. The Farage and the Reform Party are going to be every bit as bad, every bit as quick as the Labour Party. The people have to realise the whole system of governance in the UK is the problem, not the different parties.
No, of that there's no question, Roddy. But this brings us again back to what the central issue is for us as Scots. The sooner we remove ourselves from this despicable union, the sooner we can develop our own politics, and our own politics will develop naturally from the ground up, from the people up. We'll be able to strike out in a new fashion. And as Eva's pointed out, as we all point out week in, week out, this country needs rebuilt, and it cannot be rebuilt on the model of the UK. It cannot be built as a UK Mark II. We have to break all the rules. We have to create our own new rules, and we have to work out the absolute focus that our new independent government should have. And that focus should be for the purpose of creating the greatest opportunity for the greatest number of the citizens of this country. Engaging the economy, engaging all social structures to give all the people the best possible opportunities they have with a long-term vision. The problem with Britain during my lifetime is there is no concept of long-term vision. There's no long-term planning. Everything is locked into an electoral cycle. Now, when we achieve our independence, we have the opportunity to make the change. Now, whether or not it's social democracy, whether or not it's liberal democracy, that will be dictated by the people. And for the first time in 300 years, the people of this country will have the opportunity to decide what fashion our future politics will take. But the first and most important part of that will be the rebuilding of the country, the rebuilding of the nation, the rebuilding of opportunity. Now, when that's the focus, then that gives you the opportunity to actually visualize a future, a positive future, something for the people to engage with. So long as we remain part of the union, that's not possible. And unfortunately, particularly with regard to the Scottish National Party, because all the other parties are British parties anyway, they're locked into the British electoral cycle. They do not operate on the concept of the long-term planning that we as a nation require. The tragedy is the SNP has locked itself into that same electoral cycle. It judges every single achievement is based on how many seats did you win? Did you win this election? Did you win that election? When in actual fact, that is to miss the point of the purpose of the Scottish National Party and the independence movement. There is no victory until the saltire is outside the United Nations building between the flags of Saudi Arabia and Senegal. That's a fact. So long as we treat the Scottish National Party and the people treat the Scottish National Party in the same way as they treat the other British parties, they will judge them on the success within the British electoral cycle. And so long as that happens, it allows people, frankly, that are not capable of long-term thinking to have a political career in Scotland while pretending to be the flag wavers for independence. That's what we've had the past 11, 12 years, and it's time for this to stop. We have to strike out for independence for the benefit of the people. We have to strike out for independence to create a new politics, a politics that it grows from the grassroots of the people of this country and the needs and desires of the people of this country. But so long as we tie ourselves entirely and completely to the British electoral cycle and see victory within the British electoral cycle, then we keep the actual victory, which is independence, further and further away from us and from the people. The need for change is urgent. But for me, it's been urgent since the day and hour I joined the Scottish National Party some decades ago. It's too easy for us, again, to get caught up in the fluctuations of the British system and give the impression that, no, today's the day. And if we don't do it today, then all is lost. The fact of the matter is, all is lost until independence. But we have to start judging our political parties on that basis. You have not achieved until you've achieved independence. You may have mitigated, that famous wonderful word that's used by John Swinney and his predecessors, mitigating what the British do to us. So long as you're mitigating, you're failing. And we don't need any more failure. We need 2026 to be the first step on the road to victory, and the only victory is independence. Anything else, winning elections, is not victory. It's mitigation. Mitigation is not what the people of this country need. They need a new system, a new country, and a vision of the future.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree. Because, I'm of the belief, as I said in that article of mine earlier this week, Phil, people think when they put a cross in the box that they're actually choosing their government. There isn't. The narrative's been set. The people behind the back, they've made the decision who they want and they bring them in. And there's a great comment here from one of our viewers. I love this one, James. And if you want to go to our fundraiser in 2 weeks' time, you can get a ticket, mate. Get in touch. And that's reform is the end and final outcome of the Margaret Thatcher project. They will destroy, and we Scots must be ready to pick up the pieces and utilise that vacuum to gain India. James is absolutely spot on here. This is the final play for the neoliberal, extreme right-wing vulture capitalists.
Exactly, it's on the money, and you look at it. I mean, we've talked a lot about the real threat, which is reform, but even Zach Polanski, the rise of the Greens. This guy's going more to the left, and as reform goes more to the right, and this is what happens in times of crisis, because real change is required. It shouldn't be slogan-driven propaganda, as this game of politics continues with nothing really new, but it's just the more extremist, same old policies under different party names. But it's really the rise comes from mostly Zach Polanski, whose political views are, well, he describes it himself as eco-populist, linking issues such as high cost of living, which is great, climate change, which people are concerned about, not me, and supporting a wealth tax to reduce inequality. I find this much more palatable than anything reform bring, and they're the serious threat, because Zach Polanski's not going to be your next Prime Minister. Farage will, and they're the serious threat from the far right, and he's at the core. He's at the core of this. Remember UKIP? Reform is a far-right anti-immigration party. As a City of London trader in '89, Farage set up a Eurosceptic lunch group called the Column Club. This is the guy that brought us Brexit, backed by the hedge funds. He holds Enoch Powell and, as you've said, Thatcher among his key political heroes. In his maiden speech in the Commons on 23rd July, he called for Britain to quit the European Court of Human Rights. I mean, this is a target which increasingly unites Tories and the far right. That's why all the millionaires and billionaires and the Tories are jumping ship into the latest tour bus bandwagon that is reform, and they want to. I mean, they've stated he wants to start deporting people that come illegally. Farage, I mean, he released an online video on the 1st of August, 3 days after the fatal stabbing of 3 children in the Southport, with multiple far-right rallies planned across the country, stating, "What you've seen on the streets is nothing compared to what could happen over the next few weeks." And many commentators have stated that sounds more like a threat rather than a warning. This guy's bad news, and we need out as soon as possible.
The narrative and the those behind the scenes, shall we say, Alan, are definitely moving the pieces, because your party, which is of the left, no doubt about it, with Jeremy Corbyn, and they're already started. They've only just got off the blocks, and they've got their first resignation, and they've hardly got themselves going. The MP Adnan Hussein getting out, talking about all the infighting, etc., and he had to get out. The left is fantastic at defeating itself, just like the Scottish independence movement. The biggest enemies of the left is the left, and the biggest enemy of Scottish independence is the Scottish independence movement.
It's always the same. You're very rarely defeated by your enemies. You're defeated by the ones who are supposed to be on the same side as you. And it's happening far too often. I mean, the problem with your party is it had a lot of idealists joining it and creating it. I mean, before it was even registered, the two leaders had fallen out with one another. One threatened to sue the other one for breaching data protection. And it's just a total farce. I mean, they don't even know what they stand for. They believe that they can have a Scottish Youth Party, but that Scottish Youth Party will be under the same constitution and the same leadership and the same policies as the UK Reform the UKIP party, Youth Party, because that's the way the registration system works. Unless you are actually registered with the Electoral Commission, then you are not a political party. You're what's called an accounting unit, and you are bound by the same constitution and rules as your main party. So believing that your party will support independence, pull the other one. They are not even an English-centric party. They are a London-centric party. They are based in London, and London is their priority. So then this is the problem with these new parties, and the left in particular. They just love to attack one another. I mean, you've seen it in the Labour Party when Corbyn was the leader. What other party would attack your leader openly the way they were doing it? They weren't stabbing him in the back. They were stabbing him right in the chest. Accusing him of being anti-Semitic because he told the truth about what was happening in Palestine. That's not anti-Semitic. That's facts. But it looks like some of them have moved over with him and hell-bent in destroying an opposition party, because the left is just like that. They hate unity. They just can't do it. There's too many ideologies involved rather than putting the people first. The left, to me, is doing what is right by the people. It is making sure that there is fairness, making sure there is equality right throughout the board. It's not about pushing your own ideologies for people. It's making sure the rich pay the fair share of the taxation and the poor have the benefits and the services that they require to make a proper civilized society. But that's not how the left in politics works now. The left in politics is more about me, even within the left side of the politics, when we should be saying we are uniting to ensure every single citizen has equal access to all services, has a better way of life, and we all live in harmony and peace. But that's just not happening because there's too many people involved in politics for the wrong reason. And we're seeing that very clearly. And even within Reform, the amount of councillors that they got elected at the last election, and they've all either left the party, been suspended, been expelled, or transferred over to another party. Because too many people are in politics for their own personal gain and not to help the people of the constituents.
Yeah, well, we know that the SN, we've discussed it often, the SNP and the Yes movement and all the splinters off it are infiltrated. The Labour Party's been infiltrated. That's why they get rid of Corbyn, because their infiltrators wanted rid of them. That's why they're called the Red Tories, because they're more Tory than the Tory Party. That's just a fact. But here's, talking about the demise of the Tory and the Labour Party, we're getting an election cycle, Eva, and things are starting to go now when even a little Labour man like Hutchin of the Daily Record is saying the following, that Anas Sarwar will need a set of binoculars to be able to see victory at the Scottish election. It kind of tells you that the writing might be on the wall for the Labour Party in Scotland, but that's not stopping them. They're getting away. It goes back to, we're going full circle to what we were talking about earlier, Eva, is that they get away with lying all the time because the BBC in particular, but all the media, allow them to get away with it. It's a fact that, not perfect, but by every indice that there is in devolved Parliament for Scotland, Wales, and what's left in England, Scotland does better on health, education, a lot better. Not perfect, but better. But if you listen to the lies coming out of the Labour Party in Scotland, how they're new direction and they're going 10 years, it's been terrible. People in the door are saying we need to get rid of the SNP so we can get a new direction with Labour. It's lies, and no one ever pulls them up about it. They get away with it all the time.
They do, and that's wrong, and it's unfair, and the Scottish Government should be more vociferous in
absolutely
promoting what they've done that's right. But the difficulty we've got within the independence movement is that the Scottish Government at the moment is not doing as well as it could on very many different fronts. We all know what they are. They could do better in the NHS, they could do better in education, they could have done a lot better in relation to GRR, etc., deposit return scheme, you name it. But where this always takes me back to is that if Scotland were independent, we would have escaped that constitutional straitjacket that we're in just now, because it suits the purposes of the BBC and the Unionists to talk Scotland down when the likes of us want to talk Scotland up. And we need to talk honestly about our achievements, but we also need to speak very, very honestly and openly about where the Scottish Parliament has gone wrong and where we can rectify that with independence. Because you see, so many people that are within the Scottish Parliament just now as elected politicians are there because people thought if they were voting SNP, they were voting for independence. That is not what has happened. If the constitutional question were off the table, if Scotland were independent, then the politicians that would be elected would, in the main, be more capable than some of those who are inside that building at the moment. And Scotland would be performing far better for two reasons. A, because we would have escaped the economic locks that are upon us as part of the Union, because we would have full fiscal responsibility and we'd be liable for all of our own actions, but we would be able to spend from the fruits of our own resources. So we would be truly financially independent, and our resources would be used for our purposes, for the purposes that the people of Scotland prioritise, not as the result of policies imposed by Westminster, whether that's defence, foreign spending, immigration, you name it, we would write our own. So that would be one benefit of independence. And the other benefit of independence, as I've alluded to, is that you'd be electing the people that you think are the best people for the job. And the job would be the promotion of all Scottish interests and looking after the people of Scotland. And in all probability, that first government elected after independence would likely be a left-leaning coalition of like-minded people. Exponentially, because we would have the control of our own resources and would be running the country the way that it should be run, and it would be run responsibly and sensibly with an eye to the budget and an eye to the future potential of our country, where we could afford to have long-term plans like Lloyd has spoken about. We would burst out of the constitutional straitjacket that we're currently in. That's what needs to happen. We need visionaries, people of imagination, people that are strong, people that are strong-minded, strong characters that have got ideas and notions and plans that are properly thought out. That's one reason I would give a plug to Yes United, who are meeting next Saturday, the 22nd of November in Glasgow. People, please attend. You'll hear from the likes of Alec Neil, Jim Sillars, Robin McAlpine, respected figures within the movement who know what they're talking about and whose independent support and credentials and experience are beyond compare. That's the sort of people that Scotland needs, because we need to talk sensibly and strategically about Scotland's journey to statehood. No more can kicking and no more empty promises of a referendum one day and jam tomorrow. The people of Scotland deserve jam every bloody day.
Yeah, There goes my Yes United was my closing statement, but thank you. You reminded me because I might have forgotten Eva. On that, Lloyd, you'll have noticed it as well in your social media feed. Labour have got everybody they know in their granny firing all this stuff out. Desperation, it would seem to me. Or do you think they think this is a winning formula?
It's a combination. It's desperation, because I, like you, notice these things, but sometimes I just do a bit of poking about. And if you actually look at what they're saying, is there's 3 messages a day, and each and every one of the MPs and the MSPs in Scotland are under instruction to do a TikTok video or a 30-second wee video for social media, delivering the 3 messages a day. You know, it's like it's not quite your 5 a day, your fruit, but it's 3 messages a day, and the only people that are paying any attention whatsoever are other members of the Labour Party. Everybody else is turning off, because when you press the message to such a degree, and the message flies directly in the face of the reality that people see on the streets, in their workplace, in their schools, in the hospital, at the GP's surgery, then it's wasted breath, and in some ways it's absolutely counterproductive. I'm sick to the back teeth of Anas Sarwar popping up in front of me on YouTube, telling me how bad the SNP is. The Labour Party in Scotland really, it seems to have borrowed the strategists from the SNP, who think that the only way to win elections is by telling people what's bad about everybody else. The country and the people have moved on. What's required now is some of the things that Eva was just saying. What we actually require, particularly from our side of the movement, is to be honest about the position that we're in. And by being honest about the position we are in, we expose the fact that we need independence. Because when the Labour Party says you've got waiting lists, don't go back at them with, yeah, but the waiting lists are longer in Wales. What you actually need to be saying is, we've got waiting lists because we don't control our own economy, because London is making a mess of our economy. That's why we've got waiting lists. Why is our productivity low? Because London makes a complete mess of developing the productivity in this country. Why have we got a homelessness problem? Because London keeps making, and so on and so forth. And that leads me to a really important point, one I've wanted to say for a few weeks now. Why would any of our young people want to go into politics on the side of, say, the Scottish National Party, the independence movement, within a devolved structure, when all you're doing is managing the pocket money budget? You're in it. You have no ability to strategically think. You have no ability, because of the lack of control of the economy, to think long term about the proper development of the country. Why would you want to go into politics so every time you're in a press conference or every time you're in the chamber, somebody can get up and say, that's no very good, what are you going to do about it? Why would you want to do that? When what you would, and I'll tell you what you would want, is if we were an independent country, then going into politics is about being able to apply the vision, about able to apply the vision that you actually have for the future of your fellow citizens and the country. Under devolution, you can have none of that vision, because at every turn you're penny pinching to mitigate the policies of the Westminster UK government. So why would the best of our country wish to apply themselves in the political field? And this is again back to the point I made earlier, which is, yes, independence is urgent. Independence is absolutely essential and has been since the day and hour I joined the national movement. But it's more important now, because as each year of devolution goes on, the less and less the talented, the innovative, and the forward-thinking and imaginative young people of our country, the further and further they are going away from engaging themselves in the politics, because they're not stupid. Politics is not that complicated. These people understand that if effectively your parliament is a tuck shop for the school with a limited budget and a limited stock, and you can never, ever go beyond your budget, you can never think innovatively for the future, why would you want to put yourselves in that Aunt Sally situation where effectively you're standing there getting like a coconut shy, getting balls thrown at you, and there's nothing you can do about it? Why would our young people want to do that? That's why we need independence, to give our young people a vision of what they can do with political tools. Instead of them thinking that politics is no for me, politics would be for them if they were able to apply all the imagination that they've got. And let's face reality. This is a country full of imagination, full of entrepreneurship, full of care for each and every one of our citizens. But at the moment, we're now hidebound. 25 years into devolution, it's become very, very clear. Devolution is the problem, not the solution to the problems of this country. And more importantly, in the long term, devolution will become a bigger and bigger and bigger problem, because it will only draw into the politics of devolution the second rate. And that's exactly where we are at the moment. We have the second rate because devolution is second rate. Independence is first rate, and independence will release the first rate individuals in this country.
Indeed. I said some advice I give to my children was simply this: life is simple, it's people that make it complicated, and that's what's happened. And we have to just keep it simple. And the simple thing is we need independence, nothing less. Phil, if I could finish with you in this, as I was saying here, with these results, Reform in front, the desperation of the Labour Party in Scotland, are the Labour Party and the Tory Party, as we know it, in terminal decline, or will they survive?
I think they're always going to survive, and peaks and troughs, but they're in a really, really bad shape. And the Your Party split is synonymous with what has brought us to this position. See, this infighting between Corbyn, obviously, we saw what happened in the Labour Party when he was actually destroyed from within. And I was my office manager at the time read the Jewish Chronicle every time it came out, and I read the Arab Times, and we would have debates about what was going on. And I saw he raised it in the Jewish Chronicle, I think within 10 days of Corbyn being elected, of a 10-point accusation of anti-Semitism was laid against Corbyn, and that's what it started. That's what it picked up, and the mainstream media ran with it. And you see the same. This guy Adnan Hussein is also typical of the infighting that happens in politics, and we've seen it in the SNP. We're seeing it as every political party tries to get off the ground. It's inevitable, and the infighting between Corbyn and Sultana. It's also, and the status of the Conservatives and Labour have raised descriptions by some commentators as reminding them of that famous Sun Tzu quote: "An evil man will burn his own nation to the ground and rule over the ashes." And this Adnan Hussein, he's a founding member of this party. Remember, going back to that last point, because this is more of the same. He said he's stepping away from the steering group of the movement operating under Your Party, right, citing a toxic culture, particularly towards Muslim men. Now, there can be little doubt that this, as many of these other rifts pop up everywhere, these populist rifts, this is directed in this case at the immature and toxic MP who described Your Party as being a sexist boys' club. Now, I know Corbyn a little, right? And he's no more a sexist than he is an anti-Semitic. In other words, he's neither. He's not a sexist. He's not anti-Semitic. I therefore believe Sultana, Labour, Corbyn, all of these issues, and Sultana in that earlier instance, she's an ambitious populist politician who, like Nicola Sturgeon, has no problem in throwing her political mentor, in this case Corbyn, rather than Salmond, under the bus for her own political game. We see it across every party, and this is more of the same. It saddens me to see it, but when you get people who want to put themselves first, put their egos first, think they're right, and unlike Corbyn puts the people first. That's why I would put more trust in this man. If there's a fight between him and Sultana, if there's a fight between Farage and if it's a fight between anyone and any one of these leaders of Labour, Conservatives, Reform, then I'm going with the people. I'll stand with the people. And for me, the only people I really, really care about just now are the people of Scotland, because we have it in our own hands to free ourselves from this prison. And by God, we better do it soon.
Yes, we better. Well, folks, we're running out of time. The clock's beating again as usual, and we've overshot the mark. We always do. But listen, folks, we keep saying to you, you need to get involved. You can't just be involved by doing your social media account. As Lloyd, I think, said during the show, we need people to knock, excuse me, knock on the doors, to stand in the street stalls, to carry the message to the bus stop, to the workplace, to the school gates. We need people. There is a vehicle there, Liberate Scotland, that can help, but you need to get involved. You need to help us. We can't do it on our own. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here in June 26 saying, well, we had our chance and now we're stuffed. Folks, get involved, get with it. And remember, the two things we told you about is that we've got the Yes United and you've got the Liberate Scotland fundraiser. The two of them we've told you about. Get involved, folks. And until we see you, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.